Should Florida State only take transfers that are going to be immediate starters, or should they invest in their future as well and take other risks?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you to the everydayers that make this a great show. Please hit subscribe and like this podcast, share it wherever you can, and comment on YouTube. Today's show is going to focus on the transfer portal, and a key question that came from the YouTube comments is one I'm going to talk about over and over on this podcast in one way, shape, or form, and that is from poster Steve Bland, 2736. We don't need to fall into the same trap that Alabama and Georgia have. Too many starters that don't start, then they leave. What does Steve mean? This is my take, and I would like your opinion on it as well. I think Florida State, like anybody else, you get a lot of talent at a spot, but if you're not too careful and you don't have balance, kids just bounce. They're going to hit the portal. Georgia, Alabama, and other schools have some of that, but there's some risk and reward. So with that, again, should you take a player from the portal that's not going to be an immediate starter? And a little bit of it is, should you over-recruit in some areas and just let the chips fall where they may? I would like your opinion on that. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 on your first purchase. Here's the deal. It's a complicated question, but Steve's right. It's something to think about. Sometimes schools, and he's just using the big box names like Alabama and Georgia here, they over-recruit in a sense, and they don't care if they transfer out. There's a couple of points, though. Number one, great players want to play with other great players. They're more likely to sit at Georgia than they would be at Kentucky. It's just true. We're winning. They're putting guys in the NFL. I'll wait my turn. It's more likely there. Now, at the same time, you got to be careful how you allot your scholarships. For the record, you get 85 in college football as a full scholarship number. Everyone is precious. One you waste is another that somebody utilizes, and that goes against you on game day. So to read the question again from Steve, we don't need to fall into the trap that Georgia and Alabama have, taken players that are starters, but they're not starting, and then they move on. Okay. Florida State needs to recruit better out of high school. I've done a bunch of podcasts on that. With that being stated, you can also, with the transfer portal opening up, bring into this part of the equation too. Should you bring in guys that aren't going to start right away at Florida State? So here are my two answers. Most of the time, no, but there is a caveat. And that caveat is a player like Jason Zandamela, who I'll go into in depth in here in about 3 minutes. But anytime you have a guy that's in a developmental position like O-line or quarterback, it can be a little different. Receiver, corner, running back. Those are a little different. Linebacker kind of depends on the specifics of your defense and stuff. It's a little more complex. But at certain skill spots, you just know if it's a dude or not. It's really just up to them to pick up the offense or pick up the defense. It's not that rough. Running backs, like it's one of the easier positions to evaluate for guys like me that are recruiting analysts. You shoot somebody a text like, Bud Elliott and I talk about a quarterback or whatever, different players. It's easier at those spots. O-line may be a little bit different. So the second part of this is if it's a truly great player, I don't want young offensive linemen starting at my major program. Doesn't matter if it's Georgia, LSU, Florida State, Miami, Notre Dame, Oregon, does not matter. Young guys get their butts kicked up front. That's why I brought up Zandamela, who's in the portal. Again, I'll talk about him here in just a moment. If you can get an elite talent at offensive line that's only like a freshman, which Zandamela is, that's cool. I'm down with that. But if you're going to get a guy that's just okay, maybe going to be a backup guy, you've got to be in desperation mode, which, by the way, Florida State is not along the offensive line. I think they need to take a tackle if they can get one because they're just so freaking rare. But you have to be careful. You've got to be really careful that it's not going to screw up your high school recruiting, cause other filters like guys hitting the portal that are below them. They didn't think that's going to happen. And that's why I always bring up on this show constantly how I love how Norvell and his staff do their own due diligence, do things their own way, and make sure everybody's on the same page. They have guys that leave too that don't pan out or get injured and just can't play at Florida State. But overall, they've really won won the war last year, especially going 13-0 by finding key pieces from the portal on both sides. But now that the roster has gotten better, they should probably, by and large, unless it's like an offensive lineman, maybe a D tackle that's really talented, there aren't enough of them, just take starters or a guy that's going to be at least a co-star, like at running back. If it's a great player, obviously Florida State got one of Alabama's running backs this year. That's fine. Otherwise, if it's a lineman, it's a little different deal. Those guys want to play, especially offensive linemen, because you don't rotate as much. D-line, there's at least a little wiggle room. Corner, you could maybe do it to a certain extent, but those kids, they want to play, man. They're not going to wait around. Corners in particular are usually pretty short-fused about playing time. They'll transfer. Better pick what you're looking for. So here's my example for you, Jason Zandamela. He's from Clearwater Academy International. He went to Southern Cal. Florida State, Miami, and several other big-name schools were runners-up for his services. He is now in the portal. He is a center. Mo is going to be a grad student this fall as the starting center for the Noles. Great. Florida State set this year. Do they have a definitive player at center behind him that has a lot of experience that you think is an NFL player? That's rhetorical. The answer is no. There's nobody that's played a ton. You need as many bullets in the gun as you can at a critical spot like center. They make the line calls. They're going to be the guys that are right in front of the quarterback. So that A-gap blitz, you better have somebody who knows what he's doing. And finally, you need guys that are athletic enough for Florida State's offense that can pull, that can trap, that can get out on screens. You need the full package at center. Zandamela is that guy. Is he going to come in and beat out Mo? No, he's not. But that's okay. That's the exception to the rule example here. For the most part, I think you should take guys that are going to start or at least be right there. If they don't, it's on them. And you have that meeting of the minds. Hey, this is what we're going to expect out of you, and this is what we expect out of Florida State. Everybody's on the same page. You don't have transfers. You don't have cancers in the locker room. Those happen. But if you take the transfer portal, especially with a guy like Zandamela, who I know he was with Jesse Cincher at Clearwater Academy International, which ironically closed down for their football program. Jesse's now at Tarpon Springs. Took some of the kids there, fortunately. But they are a program that develops kids the right way. This is a guy that could be a starter for you for multiple years, and he gets to learn behind Mo for a year if you're able to get him. I don't know if Florida State's going after him or not, but I would. And I would be, quite honestly, really surprised if they didn't go after him. Really good centers are rare. Florida, Georgia, and Miami, I know are going after him. So let's see what happens there. But again, the key lesson here is very simple. There are exceptions to the rule. Florida State's at the point now where high school recruiting is good. I expect another top 10 class in 25. Don't need the portal as much. But this is a kid you already know and you did your due diligence on. Critical position of need. And he could play as a backup to a key guy that will at least go to the combine probably next spring in Mo Smith. So I believe Florida State would do well to go after him as an exception to the rule piece. Coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that go into figuring out the locker room and the credentials that go with that original question of whether or not Florida State's going to take certain players or not, right here on Locked On Seminoles. All right. So if you've ever been like me, you've probably had some opportunities where the game wasn't going so well. It's halftime. The scoreboard isn't looking good. You're feeling kind of well about it, and it doesn't look so good about your team having the opportunity to pull out a victory. That's when you can check in with Monopoly Go. It's a fun game. It's just like you would use when you were a kid, the board game. But this you can use on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress with your buddies. There's a lot of things you can do. Play countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge your players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests in tournaments that get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So go back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go. Now, free on the App Store or with Google Play. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities to take that player that can be an impact guy, but here's the cachet. Unlike Jason Zandamela, who I just brought up a minute ago, who's at Southern Cal and is transferring out, great kid, good personality, he's going to fit into locker rooms. That won't be a big deal. What about the guy that's a special talent or at least really good, and you could use another experienced guy to help you get into a college football playoff or whatever, but there are rumors that things didn't go according to plan. Let's put it very nicely for now. We'll get into more specifics in a moment. At his prior school, despite putting up some numbers, should you pursue, inquire? Where do you fall on this? The player I'm talking about is Keandre Lambert-Smith, wide receiver at Penn State. He's been talked about a lot of schools. Auburn's going after him, etc. Auburn needs receiver help desperately. They're kind of a bad spot. Florida State is not in that spot. They're a much better program right now. So I'm curious what you think about it. And here's what I've heard. Take this for what it's worth. I've only got one side of the story, and it's more from the administration/coaching side through a friend. So I'm the third party. This is just going to be roundabout information. But the last 3 games of last season, Lambert-Smith didn't do much. Had like a couple catches for 28 yards, something like that. It was pretty low end. Okay. It was low hanging fruit, if you want another phrase. And early in the season, he was pretty good. Here are the young man's numbers as a wide receiver for the Nittany Lions. Even before anybody asked, yes, he can run by guys. He has speed. He can be an impact player. 53 catches, 673 yards, 12.7 yards per reception, and 4 scores. Let me be clear. For those of you who didn't already know, and most of you probably do, Penn State's passing game last year was horrendous. Horribly coached, boring, archaic, and otherwise unwatchable. Despite having a guy in quarterback position that's got an NFL arm. Drew Allar's special talent. And they suck. And this kid still had over 50 catches, even though he seemed to basically check out towards the end of the year. I don't know if that's a combination of injury, interest, other things, but it just didn't work. End of the year, you can go look it up yourself. Keandre Lambert-Smith at the end of last year wasn't very good. He's in the portal. He wasn't in the spring game for Penn State. He's got a lot of opportunities. Now, Florida State's not dire need at receiver. I'm not stating that in any way, shape, or form. But let's just say Norvell and his staff inquire, just to do due diligence, just to build a portfolio of how this works over time, because there's no precedent yet. There hasn't been enough returns for somebody like me to say, well, 5 years ago, the portal's only been around for a few years. So what do we think? Does Florida State get into a situation where they inquire and they think it's enough risk, even though there were some concerns, you still take it? Is that due to Florida State not being in the quote unquote, and I'm using air quotes here for those who can't see this, perfect scenario receiver? They don't have a stud coming back that was proven physically at Florida State, knows the offense, was dominant last year. Their 2 dominant guys are gone. Jaheim's gone, etc. They lost a lot of guys that caught the football. Yeah, they got Jakai and they got different players, Hakeem, etc. I get it. They got Malik. I know that. None of them were dominant for Florida State last year, consistent. There are flashes from different guys and circumstances, but Johnny and Keon were the 2 players. That's not going to give you a warm and fuzzies if you're a coach. A lot of talent that's unproven. Let's see how it works out, especially since a lot of them have quite honestly had injury problems at Florida State. Whoever it ends up being this fall, we'll figure that out. I'm kind of done with my receiver overview, but would you take a chance on this guy? Even if you heard not the best things, which I don't think you will if you call Penn State, would you take a chance on him? And if yes, why? Comment on YouTube and let me know what your thoughts are. Either way, I get it from either perspective, because in today's game, if you don't have a playmaker, not a receiver that's good, a true I can make you miss, run by you kind of guy, it's hard to win truly big-time games. But methodical 4 yards down the field kind of drives just don't work. You've got to have an explosive, at least a 15-yard play, if not a 20-yard play, and a drive to score anymore. Defenses are really aggressive. They're coming after you, and their offense that you're going against probably going to score more than 30 if it's a quality opponent. You must hit big plays in the passing game. It's no secret. So would you take a chance on him? I think I would pass on him, but it's 50-50. It would depend, and I'm obviously never going to get this information, but I would at least inquire. And here's my take on it. I would worry about the locker room. Got some young guys and some fifth-year seniors. They got talent. They could maybe make a move. And then you got Hakeem, too. Somebody like him that's really physically skilled, big body guy that could maybe develop into that. You have to make your own prognosis based on what you've seen this spring. Those are all chemical factors, like in a big concoction that are, you just don't know how they're going to react to begin with, and then you add one piece that you really don't know and you're just dropping it in. That could explode in your face. Maybe that's a terrible example, but I just worry about the locker room so much because of what I've heard at other schools. What happened at Ole Miss last year with Judkins, who Ohio State took, the running back. He was an idiot, causing problems like cussing at the linemen and stuff in the middle of the game at Ole Miss. Don't need it. See ya. I don't care how good you are. Get out. That's my take. I don't think Florida State should take Lambert-Smith, but again, just to be clear, I haven't got direct information on it, and I don't have his side of the story. That's never good, but that's why I say you should just at least inquire. The worst that can come out of it for Mike Norvell and his staff is the following. You gain information on how the portal works more, what players want, what they expect if they're a top-notch talent. And again, he had 53 catches last year. He's really good. So that's different. You should at least look at him. The other guy that I'm talking about here at receiver, since we're on the topic, is one that's very talented that I don't know anything about. That when you talk about locker room and fit would be better for Florida State, barring something that I don't know. Again, I don't have any contacts into this. It's Sam Brown. He's from the greater Savannah area. And Florida State's recruited Georgia hard since the Bowden era and done great. South Georgia kids, Savannah, etc. The Chroma Hawks from there, they just signed. So there's that. There's a fit from a cultural standpoint. And the numbers don't lie. Okay, Sam's another guy that can run by guys and make big plays. 62 catches, 815 yards, 13.2 yards per reception, and 3 scores. Since we're talking about fit, I figured we'd keep it congruent and just talk about the offensive production from a receiver perspective. If Florida State can get a guy like that fits in, he might even know some of the players on Florida State's roster, being from where he's from. Cromwell probably knows him in some capacity. Whatever the case may be, I think that's a safer way to go. If you're going to take one at all, I would take one if it's a playmaker, and this guy is definitely one. I didn't know he was going to pop into the portal. Florida State could do worse. Again, like always, you still got to do your due diligence. Maybe he is a troublemaker. I know nothing about him other than his stats, and I saw him play. He can go high point the football and make a highlight reel catch that gets up on Fox Sports or whatever. I don't know what network the Big 12's with now, but that's something you have to think about. He was playing Power 4 football. I know it's Big 12, but he was still making plays and had over 60 catches. That's somebody you need to look at. Going into the last part of this show, we're going to talk about something else that is kind of interesting in regards to these players. Some of the guys that I think they should look at, just a couple more to kind of wrap it up today here on Locked On Seminoles. Today's opportunity is going to be with Yahoo Finance. If you're trying to get your portfolio together, here's a great idea. Wouldn't it be great if you can invest and retire in accounts in one place instead of having them in multiple spots? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access them with expert analysis anytime that you want. Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio. You want to deal with all the rising costs of inflation. You want to have money in the bank for when your time to retire is there, to pay off your mortgage, etc. You have that opportunity with Yahoo Finance. You can get access to the news, data, and tools you need in order to reach that final financial freedom. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level, and doing that is with Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, Yahoo Finance, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. Again, that's yahoofinance.com. To wrap up today, here are a couple key players that I think Florida State should at least entertain ideas of taking from the portal. And again, it's about fit, and there's some different things with this. I go back to the high school ranks. That's why I'm going to bring up Nigel Kelly. Some of you might remember him. Originally committed to Florida State. He was at Dillard High School in Fort Lauderdale, a prominent program in South Florida that Florida State goes to pretty much every year to recruit. I would imagine it is every year. This is a young man that played at Miami as a freshman. It was pretty substantial his first year. Last year, early in the season, had a shoulder injury. I do not know his status before anybody asks. That's what Florida State has to do. Once again, their own due diligence, find out through poking and prodding, get medical examinations, talking to people at Miami or other places that he went for medical advice. Hey, what's the deal? Can he play this year? Does he need a redshirt? What's the deal? I think he's somebody you should entertain. Again, there's very few guys that I think you should take that aren't starters right away, and I don't know if he would be, but he would have multiple years of eligibility. He's from Florida. He's from a program he recruited before, and you even recruited the kid himself. If Florida State's going to take a guy that's not going to start, he should at least be under advisement. Again, I just wish I knew more about whether or not Nigel is healthy. He had a shoulder injury. I don't know the answer to that. Good luck to him no matter where he goes. A guy that I find intriguing, and this is why football is so nuts in general, Anthony Dunn. He played at FAMU, Florida A&M's in Tallahassee. But while it's not Division I, hear me out. Here are his stats from last year. Not too shabby. As a defensive edge guy, 46 tackles, 8 sacks, 12.5 tackles for loss. Let's say that production was cut in half as a Power 4 player. Would you take a guy that you could add into your defensive rotation and at least compete for starting minutes if those stats were in half? If they were in half for this year for Florida State, would you take this? 23 tackles, 4 sacks, and 6.5 tackles for loss. I would take that from a guy that's a backup or starter and be pretty happy with it. It's pretty good production. Again, played in Florida. He's a kid that's produced. He's played against some top teams because FAMU always plays somebody like Florida State, Miami, Georgia Tech, whatever. They always play teams in the Power 5. So you can watch some film of him. I think that's an intriguing kind of way to go. He's even played in your state. He's played in Tallahassee. So this isn't that hard for me to look at. I think that's somebody you should kind of take a look at. Final player, and this is another one of those that kind of goes along with Jason Sandamella that I mentioned earlier. No idea where Florida State stands on this, but these are the kinds of evaluations that will either help or hinder your program. Peyton Kirkland played at Dr. Phillips in Orlando, signed with the University of Texas. He is in the transfer portal. He is a massive 6'6", 340-pound offensive lineman, or whatever he is now. I don't know if he's 320, 340, somewhere in that range. Big kid, could play guard, possibly be a right tackle. Massive young man, good kid, easy going. I think that's somebody they should kick the tires on. He would have 4 years of eligibility. And Florida State needs to get back to the point where they're getting some of the better linemen from inside the state of Florida. Peyton was one of those guys. Is he interested in Florida State? Does he want to be in Orlando? I'd imagine UCF would love to have him. I know they recruited him hard, Gus Malzahn. But I think it's somebody that Norvell and his staff should at least take a stab at and see where he stands. It's not necessarily a main priority because I don't think he's ready to start by any means. But as a third-year player, as I constantly mention on this show, he's a guy I think that could compete for a starting job at Florida State. So 2025. This year, probably not. Third year removed from high school. That'd be somebody I think you could definitely take a look at. To wrap up today, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Hit that notification bell and do whatever you can, for me if you would, to share this podcast. Finally, comment on the overall theme. Should Florida State take transfer portal players that aren't immediate impact players and can start? Why or why not? If you want to expand on it like I did, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Everybody have a great day. This has been Locked On Seminoles.